Okay, gentlemen, this Monday, October 28th, is what we would like to call the sports equinox, only the 30th in history when all four major sports have regular season matchups on the same night or playoff matchups on the same night, barring weather issues. But we could do better than the sports equinox. Why do we have to deal with astrology in our sports? Guys, Anthony Strait, Jay Kaplan, rename this now.
Rename this.
Rename
Rename
this.
it.
Rename the sports equinox.
I don't know. I kind of the sports perfect storm.
I'll take it.
Oh,
Anthony?
oh, I would say sports apocalypse. Just everything just
Love it.
coming in the full
That's
circle.
better. That's better. I like that. Anyway, in the famous words of U2, uno, dos, tres, catorce. I would just call it the quattro, but U2 math. Anyway, it's the sport. It's the Honor Sports Alliance World Series NBA Kickoff 2024. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Good evening, gentlemen. Okay, so it takes a lot to take away from everyone's favorite sport, the NFL, away from the rundown and the heart of fall. But tonight we have the perfect formula to eliminate the pigskin. It's one part World Series preview, one part local NBA, one part national NBA preview, and let's dash it up with the sprinkle of the New York Liberty finally winning it all. So let's get started with tonight's first pitch. Do not raise the roof next time in my presence. Jesus Christ. Anyway, the New York
Anthony
Yankees.
deserving of a roof being raised. Anthony agrees
Uh,
with me.
the New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers are the most common World Series matchup in the game of baseball. This is matchup number 12 in late October. However, in our lifetime, Anthony, sorry, Jay, you don't qualify in that statement. We haven't even seen the two former city rivals face each other. It's true. I'm sorry. It's completely 100% true. But it's the first time that we've seen New York and LA in 45 years in the Fall Classic. This will be the first time the home run champions in each league have met at this stage since 1956, when it was also a Yankee, Mickey Mantle, and a Dodger, Duke Snyder. These two franchises currently have around 100 combined Hall of Famers. Let's talk hitting and pitching on both sides of this soon to hopefully be epic World Series, starting with Jay and the key to the true to their name, Bronx Bombers.
Yeah, the key for the Yankee lineup is to keep drawing walks and keep slugging. The late Earl Weaver, the legendary Baltimore Orioles manager from 1968 to 1982, and then again from 85 to 86, used to say, quote, the key to winning baseball games is pitching fundamentals and three-run homers. The late Bob Prince, who was the legendary play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1948 to 1975, used to say when the team was trailing, quote, we need a bleeder, a bloop, and a blast. The 21st century version of those quotes, when combined and updated, distinctly defines the New York Yankees offensive philosophy. A base hit, a base on balls, and a three-run homer. It served them well in the regular season, and it is the reason that they're facing the Dodgers in the World Series for the first time in the Aaron Judge era, and as the rabbi said, the 12th time overall. The on-base percentage and slugging all starts with the Bronx Bombers' big three of Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Giancarlo Stanton. Judge, Soto, and Stanton ranked in the top 4 this season in barrel rate, and home runs hit 110 miles per hour or harder, and ranked in the top 5 in hard hit rate. When any of these three step into the batter's box, chances of the ball leaving the yard are exponentially higher than any other Yankee hitter. Soto and Stanton have been huge across both the Division Series and the League Championship Series, while Judge looks like he's nearing a breakout. Here's their numbers for the 5-game ALCS against the Guardians, along with some other interesting numbers from the rest of the team. Judge, 167, 261, 500 slash line. It's a 761 OPS. 2 homers of his 3 total hits, 6 RBI, 4 runs scored, 2 walks. Soto, 368, 478, 895 slash line. It's a 1373 OPS, 3 homers, 6 RBI, 5 runs scored, 4 walks. Soto owned the ALCS finale, a double, a single, and his 3rd home run on the 7th pitch of an at-bat against Hunter Gaddis. He fouled off 4 pitches after going down in the count 1-2, and after each one, he'd nod his head as almost as if to say, go ahead, throw that again. I'm hitting in the seats. Through 9 postseason games, Soto has a 203 weighted runs creative plus. Stanton, 222, 333, 889 slash line. It's a 1.222 OPS. All 4 of his hits in the league championship series left the yard. It's 7 RBI, 5 runs scored, 3 walks, and took home the ALCS MVP trophy. Stanton's 16 playoff home runs in pinstripes place him 4th all-time behind Bernie Williams, 22, Derek Jeter, 20, and Mickey Mantle with 18. And Stanton has 10 homers and 26 RBIs in 25 career games at Dodger Stadium. Remember, Giancarlo Stanton grew up in SoCal, so this is a homecoming for him. The rest of the team in the ALCS had a 250, 338, 470 slash line. 809 OPS, 10 homers, 25 RBI, 29 runs scored, 22 walks. Stanton, Soto, and Judge accounted for 9 of those 10 Yankee homers in the ALCS. Wells had the other. 3 other Yankees who played all 5 games of the series had it on base above 400. Anthony Rizzo, and even 500, reaching base on 8 of his 16 plate appearances. Anthony Volpe, 476, reaching base on 10 of his 21. Gleyber Torres, 400, reaching base on 10 of his 25. Torres and Soto, as the first 2 hitters in the Yankee lineup, have truly set the tone, reaching base in 9 of their 10 first inning plate appearances. They've made only 3 outs combined in the first inning of the Yankees' 9 October games. Torres' postseason walk rate is 15.6%, which is a huge increase from his 9.8 rate in the regular season. The question is whether this is a product of some increased focus and patience by the Yankee second baseman, or it's a result of the wildness that the Royals and Guardians pitching staffs displayed. If it's the product of the increased focus and patience, and he keeps getting on base in front of Soto, Judge, and Stanton, the Yankees' offense is much deeper than just that trio of Bronx Bombers. Now, New York drew just 1 walk in the ALCS clincher in Cleveland, but they've drawn walks in 13.9% of their plate appearances in October. That's more than any other playoff team in this season, and more than all but 5 of the 512 playoff teams in baseball history. The Yankees follow a hitting strategy that only the best teams can reliably execute. When you swing at the right pitches, you'll have a better chance to hit home runs. The Yankees led the majors in walks, 672, and home runs, 237. They were 3rd in on base, 333, 4th in slugging, 429, 3rd in OPS at 761, and tied for 3rd in OPS plus at 115. The on-base percentage and OPS marks led the American League. Yankees achieved all of this without an abundance of strikeouts, also known as the 3rd of the 3 true outcomes of a plate appearance. While 4 Yankee hitters did fan at least 140 times this season, Judge, Volpe, Jazz Chisholm, and Stanton, the Yankees only ranked 20th overall in strikeouts. Now, if they're able to execute this strategy against the Dodgers as well as they did against Cleveland, especially if it includes Judge hitting more like his regular season AL MVP self, the Yankees have an excellent chance of finally ending the chase for 28.
The patience of the Yankees in most of these playoff games has actually been pretty outstanding outside of a few in the lineup so far. It's also been very just remarkable seeing how they know what pitches to not swing at, and if they are going to swing at it, kind of like Giancarlo Stanton did in Game 5 of what ended up being. And it was kind of like, I'm gonna swing at this pitch, which I know would be a ball, because I want you to throw me a much better pitch. And Cleveland obliged. Yeah, so it's gonna be very interesting to see how that goes in the World Series. So the Dodgers have that same sort of discipline, but have a lot more people. So there's a lot more video to see of some of these baitings that some of these batters have done at the plate.
Yeah, and the way the Yankees just utterly crushed the vaunted Cleveland bullpen is, and a lot of that is what happens is when you see relievers over and over again because the team you're playing does not have any depth in starting pitching, and far too many of their innings have to be picked up by their bullpen. It's easier for you to get a sense of what you're going, you already know, you've seen every one of their pitches already by the 2nd or 3rd time you've seen them. And that's kind of what the Yankees do. They just wait. Everything is kind of like Soto, like his impact on this Yankee hitting, this Yankees hitters this year has been amazing. They have all kind of, in a lot of ways, borrowed from his approach, and it's paying off. So the interesting thing will be to see is because the Dodgers, like the Cleveland Guardians, are lacking in starting pitching depth, how much of the outs are going to have to be recorded by their bullpen, and how long is it going to take for the Yankees have gotten to see enough of their stuff to be able to do the same kind of damage.
But not to beleaguer the point, I'll talk about in a second, is the difference between the two bullpens is Stephen Vogt for the Guardians was more inclined to go to his bullpen first. Dave Roberts has used it judiciously. The best case example would be Game 5. We'll talk about that, but Game 5 of the NLCS when he didn't use a lot of players. He used 3, so he has long men to do it. Cleveland doesn't have that. We'll talk more about that as we go along. But Anthony, let's talk about the Yankees pitching. That chase to 28 is also going to have to rely on some keys on the map. Which are you looking at?
Well, if you watch the NLCS, the one thing the Yankees have to do is they gotta be aggressive. They gotta attack the strike zone. They cannot afford to do what the Mets did in the National League Championship Series was get behind in the count, walk guys, put them on base. The Dodgers in the 6-game NLCS win over the Mets, drew 42 walks and scored 46 runs in 52 innings of baseball, and literally scored 8 runs or more in all 4 of their victories in the series. And case in point, when you look at games 1 and game 2 of the NLCS, Sean Manaea got the message right away. He attacked the Dodgers hitters right early in the count, stayed ahead, kept guys off the base pass, did not walk any hitters, and for the most part, for the first 5 minutes, kept the Dodgers lineup under control. Now look at game 1 and game 3, games 3 and 4. When you looked at Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, when they were unable to find the strike zone, and with the Mets, their pitching staff relies so much on chasing and swinging and missing outside the strike zone against a really disciplined Dodger lineup with a Shohei Ohtani that just the splits are kind of outrageous when you think about what he does when nobody on compared to what he does when runners on base. Mookie Betts able to find his stroke, but the lineup is top to bottom just dangerous, and this is without a Freddie Freeman that's banged up with an ankle injury. You think about the NLCS MVP, Tommy Edman, who's batted 4th cleanup, and then the folk hero Kike Hernandez showing everyone that when it's October, he shows up. He won't be anywhere around for the regular season, but if it's October, here he comes.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But when you look at game 1 starter Garrett Cole, I think I talked about this in the last show. In his second start against the Royals in the division series, he relied on a fastball 55% of the time. In the regular season, opposing hitters batted 189 against that fastball. And when you think about needing to establish a strike zone and dominate early and get ahead in counts, that's going to be a very key pitch for Garrett Cole to set up that knuckle curve that keep the hitters off balance without question. We saw that in his 3 starts this so far in the postseason. Game 2, Carlos Rodon, same thing. Got to pound the strike zone. These are Dodger hitters a Dodger team that is just as patient as the Yankees. Like, you look at this World Series, it's like watching 2 bottom out version of a team that I remember growing up watching as far as plate discipline, and that's the 1998 Yankees that was notorious for literally waiting out a starting pitcher and they're giving the quality strikes, but they're not chasing anything out of the strike zone. And remember, that's a team, nobody hit over 25 home runs, but they had about 67 guys that batted in the high 280s, 290s, and 300s, and they led the league in runs scored. And that's the kind of plate discipline that both of these teams bring into, but where the Yankees have their advantage is the starting rotation. Then you look at Clark Smith for game 3, same thing. Got to get ahead in counts early, make the Dodgers put the hitters put the ball in play, and it'll be a big boost if Nestor Cortez can come back and give the Yankees anything, even if it's not as a starter. Maybe has someone out of the bullpen in case maybe game 3, if Smith struggles early, if maybe game 4 Luis Gil struggles early on. And that's a good little insurance policy for Aaron Boone. But when you look at the Yankees as a whole, just on rotation, they've done a great job of attacking hitters early on. But this is a different lineup than the Royals and the Guardians, who didn't hit a lot of home runs. And the Guardians, who showed that even with their play, this was susceptible to chasing out of the strike zone. Um, that's what it is. They're just gonna have to stay ahead in the counts and try to keep the walks down to a minimum, because you saw the Dodgers. The biggest difference in the Dodgers still playing and the Mets going home was the Dodgers taking advantage of runners in scoring position compared to a Met team that left 7 or more runners on base in each of the losses, particularly Game 6 where they left 13 men on base. So that's the biggest difference for the Yankees. They're gonna have to just stay ahead of the count. And for Garrett Cole, and I said this in the last show, he is the guy who's gonna set the trend for this Yankee rotation. And he's a guy that the Dodgers wanted as a free agent. And what better way to stick it to remind the Dodgers of what they missed out on a few seasons ago, is to go into Game 1 and to really be able to take the Dodgers lineup out early on. And also another thing too is going to have to mix up how he attacks the hitters the second and third time around the lineup. We've seen the Dodger hitters, particularly Mookie Betts, adjust to pitches the second and third time around. Talked about the Dodgers lineup is pretty dangerous, and the Yankees are going to have their work cut out. But this is the one advantage in the World Series that they do have, and that is starting pitching. And obviously, Rabbi, I'll set you up with this one. The bullpen as well, and those are the two things that Aaron Boone is going to have to lean on, because who knows if the Yankees offense go cold. I mean, it's always great to have the fact that the starting pitcher is going to keep the other teams off the scoreboard.
Yeah, four legitimate starters, Rabbi, and all of them in my mind, all of them have to at least put in 5 innings in their starts in order for the bullpen not to get taxed in this series against a very lethal Dodger lineup.
That's going to be very hard because both sides are not going to put in 5. I understand what you're saying. We've talked about this. You're a lot more old school on that. Definitely Cole and Rodon will definitely have to put in more than 5, because those are the two that they lean on. I think that's going to be a little bit of a stretch for Hill. That Schmidt might be a little bit of a stretch for too, but I think it's really going to be a situational matchup here when it comes down to it. I think that's going to be the real key in this entire series. I don't think there. Let's get to what I'm thinking now in terms of what Anthony had originally set me up with. I'll go backwards on this and start with the defense and talk about that bullpen. We already know that the Dodgers are going to throw out Flaherty in Game 1, Yamamoto in Game 2, Buehler in Game 3. Likely the best chances of getting 5 to 6 innings is those Games 1 and 2, and what would probably eventually be Game 5 and 6 of that series. They've already committed the Dodgers to saying they will go bullpen game in Game 4. Now, there's been many bullpen games that the Dodgers have done this in these playoffs, and only 11 games. They've played 3 bullpen games at least. Game 4 of the NLDS was brilliant. It was a game where they were on the line. Their season was on the line, and they pretty much shut out the Padres. Game 6 of the NLCS, obviously, it was a little bit of a struggle at times, but that was a game where the Mets were pretty much held at bay right after they didn't really cash in that first inning with runners in scoring position. They had ducks on the pond in pretty much the first 3 innings of that game. However, if you watch Game 2 on Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day of the NLCS, that was a game where the Dodgers bullpen was hit pretty much right from the beginning, and that game wasn't even close. Now, we're talking about the bullpen, and yes, they got a big rest going from Sunday, getting 4 days off before going into this World Series. But just look at the innings pitched. Michael Kopech, 5 1/3 innings. Ben Kasperi, 4 1/3 innings. Anthony Banda, 5 2/3. Ryan Brazier, 7 innings. Evan Phillips, 6 2/3. Daniel Hudson, 4 1/3. Blake Trinan, 8 innings pitched. And he is the one who actually went the most amount of outs in the clincher in Game 6. He got 4. Now, the Dodgers are probably going to carry the maximum 13 relievers on the roster, and that doesn't even include Brent Honeywell, most likely, who has probably been their long man and was one of the reasons why they were able to not tax the bullpen in Game 5. Dodgers used 7 pitchers in that Game 6. So, again, the only batter to retire more than 4 was Blake Trinan. So, thanks to the injuries to Tyler Glasnow, thanks to the injuries to Tony Gosselin, thanks to the injury to Clayton Kershaw, and Walker Buehler is about 25% Walker Buehler in this case. So that's one of the reasons why the Dodgers are they're still going to need their. I think Jay said it perfectly. The Yankees are probably going to have to get a little more out of their starters because not just because that's old school, because they have the capability of doing that. The Dodgers don't have the capability really of doing that outside of the Flaherty and Yamamoto games. In the other games, they're going to pretty much have to assume, obviously, outside of the bullpen game, that they're going to need to get at least 15 to 18 outs out of that bullpen, pretty much bar none. But they can do that because the one thing that Dave Roberts has done in these playoffs is use his bullpen judiciously. And that's something that we did not see in the Cleveland series because Stephen Vogt kind of always holds to the bullpen a little bit earlier. Roberts will allow starters to kind of go through the struggles. Now, the difference is the struggles in that series could lead to a big 5 to 6 run inning because once you get past, if you struggle with the bottom of the Yankees lineup, you have to deal with the top of the Yankees lineup. The top of the Yankees lineup is about as deadly as you can get. So that's going to be a very interesting way to see how that goes on once the starters are out for the Dodgers. Now, get a Jack Flaherty 7 inning type of game or Yamamoto 6 to 7 inning type game. I could pretty much go to the tickets and cash them out right now because the Dodgers will most likely be winning those games where they can keep the Yankees below 2 to 3 runs. You're not going to be seeing too many pitchers. I'm going to tell you that right now. Let's talk about Shohei Ohtani because we have never talked about Shohei Ohtani in baseball this entire year. It's a very, very quiet subject, so very, very under the radar. With all of the stats between Ohtani and Judge, the two sports' most marketable players, meaning in this World Series, here's another one for you. This is the first ever time that opposing players in a World Series have combined for over 100 runs in the regular season. And they went way past that. 112 home runs combined between Judge and Ohtani. No one ever even hit triple digits. Obviously, Ohtani is the first 50-50 player, 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases. You know that. Slash line of 286, 434, 500 in this postseason. Let's go back to when they played in early June. And you still know it's about the same hitting staff outside of Kiki Hernandez, who just loves to hit in the postseason. He's essentially the new Mr. October when it comes to it, but he's just not Mr. March through September. That's the problem. But he was only 2 for 13, 1 RBI, 1 walk, 4 runs scored. With runners on, 6 for 9 in October, and since mid-September, so we're talking pretty much a month and a half of stats. 18 for 23, 28 runs scored. This is also, by the way, the first time that two players have who are 9 wins above replacement on both sides, Judge and Ohtani, have faced off in this World Series. Last time, 1946. Two guys named Ted Williams and Stan Musial, by the way. Back to Ohtani. 17 times reaching base the NLCS. No one's ever done that before for the Dodgers. 934 OPS overall. But his number with the base is empty, as we mentioned before. 138. And this is not something that we hadn't seen during the regular season. Very rare. Do you see a guy hit pretty much the same with the bases empty? Yeah, he bet 311. Then with the bases having ducks on the pond, 308. So, but again, that makes Ohtani almost even more of an anomaly in baseball history. So, again, 1 through 9, the Dodger lineup is better than almost anybody else in baseball. They can they can slug their way to a World Series, which is why they're basically doing it with 2.5 pitchers on the mound in terms of starters. However, Ohtani sets the table. If Ohtani does what Ohtani does, the Dodgers are going to win this World Series. And I think we've had a lifetime of memories already for Shohei Ohtani. What's one more World Series? All
The
right.
man splits in the league championship series with runners on and the base is empty is about as extreme a performance, is about as extreme a set of splits as I've ever seen, Rabbi. That's beyond ridiculous.
Even then, though, it's just the fact that what you see with Otani, even in a pressure situation for somebody's first postseason, dealing with a lot of great postseason players, it's still very impressive. And again, these series, if these games end up 2-1, I will be disappointed. I will tell you that right now. I want to see the Yankees win, obviously, as a fan, but I expect fireworks on late October, and I want them to happen because I feel like it should happen. We'll talk about
You
more.
know, you know what's gonna be
But
fun with this series is when the series shifts to the Bronx and on a windy night that right field porch and how enticing it may be for one a guy like Carlos Stanton who always hits the opposite field anyway, and then you have the Dodgers power hitters coming in. By the way, I kind of forgot this that they played each other back in June.
yep, I was actually
In
at
the
that
Bronx.
last game. I was actually at that last game, the only game that the Yankees got in that world in that 3-game series, and Dodgers kind of took over that town a little bit. They are the biggest draw right now in baseball, so let's see what happens. This is going to be a very intriguing series. Very rarely does baseball get their perfect storm, as we mentioned beforehand, and here we go. So it's going to be a very, very fun series, and honestly, obviously, Yankee fans expect no more than number 28. So let's see if they can deliver. It's going to be there's just so many things that kind of legacy is on the line, intriguing matchups, and again, just the historical dichotomy of what we're about to see with Judge and Otani after the season that they've had there. You almost never see it in baseball. That's why we're mentioning names like Duke Snyder, Mickey Mantle, and Stan Musial in this show, and we're doing it for a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
I would say this: the only thing that's missing in this series, with all the historical references, the voices of Vince Scully, Howard Cosell, Keith Jackson, who called those World Series games in the 70s and 80s. Yes, I am a historian. I go on YouTube and watch those old classic games all the time, so so I'm very aware of those matchups. But yeah, it should be a really fun series to watch.
Yeah.
Just for me, from being a baseball fan.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, and it just kind of dawned on me. Vin Scully's voice is really the only thing that's missing, considering the number of Yankee Brooklyn Dodger World Series that he called, and then obviously, the ones out when the Dodgers moved to LA. It's sad that we won't have his voice. Yankee fans will at least have John Sterling's on the radio.
Not the same comparison. Moving on.
No,
Okay.
no. Hey, it's as close as Yankee fans are going to get.
Like,
I didn't go. Move on.
We could go all that. Okay. Let's move on to the hardwood, and that's how we're going to do it for the rest of the show. After a 50-32 regular season and a playoff run that ended in a second-round Game 7 on the MSG floor to the Indiana Pacers, where the Knicks were pretty much the walking wounded at that point, the New York Knicks did not stand on their laurels. Yes, I used the word laurels. Go look it up. Going into 2024-25, they did some work. The Knickerbockers secured Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby's futures in the orange and white and brought Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges into Manhattan. Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo got their walking papers out from the land of the East River to the land of the 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. So now, with all of that, let's see what 2024 brings as the Knicks open their season tomorrow against the Indiana Pacers. And let's not even mention the fact of what happened 48 hours ago against the Boston Celtics. Do not even talk about it. No, banned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gonna talk about it.
Oh, no, I have to talk about it. I'm talking about the Celtics the next segment. Anthony, who is under the spotlight for the orange and blue in 2024-25?
Well, it's going to be Karl Anthony Towns, and obviously, and yes, I'm going to have to bring this up because he only scored 12 points in 7 boards, 25 minutes, in whatever that was the other night in Boston. But to prove your point, you mentioned what was left of the Knicks I compare it to the movie Glory, and at the end it's the last rush, the last brigade, and everybody's kind of falling. And if you've never seen the movie, Glory is a great comparison. It's a good movie, but pretty
Vince.
much there wasn't too many guys left when they finally got to the end of the brigade. Not realizing it was an ambush on the other side of it. That was the Knicks in Game 7 last spring to the Indiana Pacers. What was left of them anyway. But Karl-Anthony Towns is the guy that's going to be under the spotlight because of the obvious. One, he's an all-star that was traded for literally a week before camp started. He was in Minnesota and found out he was being traded to the Knicks the moment he landed for camp. But but what he brings to the table is a big who is is an offensive threat. For a floor spacing, he's going to be able to do that. He shot 39% career from deep and 41% of his 3-pointers last season and helping Minnesota get to the Western Conference Finals. So the offense is there. He's a 20-10 guy who's been a multiple MVP. We also saw and his passing ability should really help the Knicks offensively, particularly when you look at guys like Bridges and Anunoby, who are wing players who attack the basket more than anything. It should also allow Jalen Brunson a little more space to operate when he has the ball in his hands. Well, the adjustment's going to be defense. And we saw, look, not too many teams going to hit 29 3-pointers on a given night, but it was the rotation, the lack of communication, and the fact that half of those 3-pointers, the Celtics were wide open on a lot of those looks. That is something that defensively that's going to be the biggest adjustment with the Knicks and these new and particularly Karl-Anthony Towns, and then whether or not he could be a shot blocker and a guy who can defend the basket. Because in the first quarter, guys get to the paint a little too easy. That is something that the Knicks are going to have to clean up. But that's where Karl-Anthony Towns' biggest question mark going to be. It's going to be, can he defend the paint? The Knicks are short-handed right now. Pressure Chua not available. He's injured. We know Mitchell Robinson is going to be out the next few months until December, maybe January at the latest. And he's going to have to be key in at least being able to rebound and defend, which is definitely, when you look at his stats, he's a guy who averages 10 rebounds a game and 8.3 just last season. We played alongside Rudy Gobert. Now he's playing back in his natural position as a center. And this is one of the things that if you're going to play for Tom Thibodeau, you have to be able to do. Rebound, defend. And that's going to be one of the biggest questions he's going to have to answer. But offensively, you saw it. I mean, 25 minutes. And there's one thing, and I hate to agree with Charles Barkley, but I have to agree with him on this one. If you have look, no disrespect to Jrue Holiday, but if you have a small guy on you, you should be demanding the basketball down in the paint, and even screaming at your teammates, get the ball to me and let me go to work. I like to see Karl-Anthony Towns be a little more, maybe because it's the first game, he's still trying to fill his way through the offense and with his teammates. He haven't, obviously, as a short time to be around his teammates, didn't play a whole lot of minutes during the preseason. But I do want to see him be a little more set up on the offensive side of the basketball, particularly on those switches when he has somebody small than him. Clearly, we saw when he had the ball in his hand, he can definitely score with ease. He gets to the basket, gets to the foul line, and obviously, when he has a big on him, he can draw a big away from the basket, and that frees up the other wing players in the Knicks. So that is definitely something that I would like to see him do on that end of the basketball on that end of the court. Defensively, he's got to be able to do a better job of being a rim protector.
You just mentioned, though, by the way, the one thing that would worry me about Towns to begin with. He is coming into a system, and it's not his. This is not his show. This is Brunson's show, and I think it's going to be harder to say, "Give me the ball." It's going to be harder. Don't tell me that all of a sudden that you want to see 60-point, missing 5,000 shot Karl-Anthony Towns coming back in. It's going to take a little bit for him to kind of get his footing on this team. And I think that's the one thing that I would worry about with Karl Anthony Towns. Like it's almost kind of like Julius Randle in this situation, except he's bigger. This is a team that has an identity that Karl Anthony Towns is going to have to conform into. Now, at the point, by the way, playing 24 minutes in a Tom Thibodeau offense is kind of like a vacation. You almost actually, it actually almost didn't count if you played less than 30. Josh Hart would be pissed. But I think that just it's going to take a little bit. I'm not saying that opening night is going to be like, oh my God, all of these problems. That was just like a freight train that was coming in and it was just running over everybody in the station. But if you see a difference in Karl Anthony Towns in sort of not being the Karl Anthony Towns that we saw in Minnesota for at least the first 10, 15, 20 games of the regular season, I think that'll be why. That's just what I think in there, because you can't, skills don't always transfer all-star from one spot to another when you go into a different system. And I know he's worked with Tibbs before, but this is the Jalen Brunson Knicks we're talking about here. He is an all-star, but he is not the all-star of this team.
See, and Rabbi, the reason I kind of disagree with you in terms of like ramp up time is that Cat's coming to the situation he's coming into right now is pretty similar to the one he just left. It was Anthony Edwards' show last year. Everybody knew it. Cat knew it. So I think it's not unfamiliar territory for him to be the Robin to someone else's Batman. Granted, Edwards and Brunson are different type of players, different type of scorers, different skill sets, but the slot that he's stepping into is not completely different from the slot he just left. Is there going to be an adjustment period? Sure. The T-Wolves run a different offensive system under Finch than the Knicks do under Tibbs. So, but what I think he will give them, along with everyone else who they brought on board, is a lot more options, better spacing. He's less of a ball stopper than Randle.
Eventually, yes, by the way. Yes.
Right. Look, there's going to be ramp up time. We all know that, like, NBA GMs generally say they don't really know who their team truly is until Christmas. So I think that's when you'll get a sense of the entire team, but I don't think it'll take that long for Cat to, find his spots on the floor and figure out how to run the pick and roll with Brunson, and how to bring what he does best and mesh that with what Brunson does best. And I think Tibbs, knowing him and knowing who he is and how his skill set works, I think that will also make that ramp up time not as long and not as disjointed, like you said, because he knows him. He knows what Kaplan.
Oh no, I know that. I think the bigger difference for me is not that he is not a Robin, but it's more you're the outsider of a team that has been cohesive together. OG, Hart, you're not. That's what I would worry about. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but if you see this not working, or at least Towns' numbers falling below 20 points per game for a certain amount of time, that's what I would mention. That's what I would consider the reasoning. I understand what you're saying, though. Stars will be stars no matter where they travel. That I completely understand. Like I said, anything that happened in that Boston game is almost a burn the tape game.
Yeah, that's not indicative of anything. But you got to remember, it's not just Towns that has to adjust. OG missed most of his time with the Knicks. Bridges is brand new. Granted, he has history with both Hart and Brunson, but still, this is a brand new starting five. So it's going to take a while for all of them to kind of somewhat get used to if you think about it, the only two guys on that starting five who had any significant minutes together last year were Hart and Brunson. Everybody else is basically got to start from day one again.
Speaking of starting five, let's go completely opposite and talk about the player that's under the radar that could build up the bench for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and that's, Cameron Payne. One of the things that concerned a lot of basketball industry folk, Knicks fans, as well as the New York and national basketball media, including the three of us, about the Knicks trading Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo to the T-Wolves for Karl Anthony Towns was the hit that trade leveled to the New York Knicks bench. The quality depth of Tom Thibodeau's rotation last season was how the Knicks survived all the injuries to the likes of Randle, OG, Mitchell Robinson and others throughout the regular season and into the playoffs until they ultimately ran out of bodies against the Pacers in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Now, Cat for Randall was arguably, and it'll be argued for the rest of the year, a wash in terms of talent for talent, big for the most part. But replacing DiVincenzo, who averaged 15 and a half points per game in just 29.1 minutes per game, that works out to 19.2 per 36 minutes and 26.9 per 100 possessions, and knocked down his 8.7 three-point attempts per game at a 40.1% clip, and took on a lot of the secondary ball handling and playmaking responsibilities when defenses swarmed star point guard Jalen Brunson and forced him to essentially play off the ball. Replacing that is what gave us all pause. Sure, the Knicks drafted point guard Tyler Kolek from Marquette, who led the nation in assists last year, but giving him the bulk of the non-Brunson minutes off the bench running the point for the second unit was highly unlikely. Have you met the Knicks head coach? Which brings us to a 10-year vet who, despite flying under the radar for most of it, you saw what I did there, has carved out a pretty nice career for himself as a solid, legit backup point guard and three-point shooter, two skills the Knicks roster desperately needed to replace. Now, Payne signed with the Knicks on a one-year deal for the veteran minimum after splitting last season between Milwaukee and Philadelphia. Over 78 games between the two teams, Payne put up a shooting slash line of 43.2% from the floor, 39% from three on 3.4 attempts per game, 86.6% free throw percentage, averaging 7.4 points per game, 1.5 boards, and 2.6 assists against 0.8 turnovers. That's a better than 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio in just 16.7 minutes per game. For his career, he's averaged 7.9 points, 2.1 boards, 3.3 dimes against 1.2 turnovers, which is better than a 2.5-to-1 assist, 2.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio on career slash line, a shooting slash line of 42.2% from the floor, 36.9% from three on 4.1 attempts per game, and 82.5% from the stripe. Those extrapolate out to some pretty solid per 36 minute numbers: 15.9 points per game, 4.2 boards, 6.6 assists. Payne's time with the 76ers is ultimately how he wound up in New York. In 31 games, including 8 starts, he averaged 9.3 points, 1.8 boards, 3.1 assists against just 1.1 turnovers. That's a better than 2.8 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. He shot 41.3% from the floor, 38.2% from beyond the arc on 4.4 attempts per game, and 91.3 from the stripe in 19.4 minutes per game. Those are solid backup point guard numbers, but it was the 11 points he scored off the bench in Game 3 of Philly's opening round series against the Knicks that kind of sealed the deal, though he didn't know it at the time. The veteran guard reminded everyone that he is a capable postseason performer. He took Buddy Hield's spot in the rotation and hit 44.4% of his 18 attempts from beyond the arc over the 5-game series. Now, Payne's ability to dribble, pass, and shoot stood out to a Knicks team that was lacking in those departments after losing DiVincenzo. As Payne told the Murray Ledger Times, the reason he signed with the Knicks in the offseason was, quote, "Yeah, the good thing was when I had talks with them this summer, they kept telling me, oh man, you impressed us so much in Game 3, you helped them win that game." Now, the Knicks starters played 80 preseason minutes together, the most for any preseason lineup by a wide margin. And part of that was, as I said earlier, so that the new members of the starting five, Cat and Mikal Bridges, could start to develop chemistry with the holdovers, Brunson, Josh Hart, and Anunoby, who is returning from injury. But it also speaks to the concerns over the depth behind them. In the opening night, 132-109 loss to the Celtics, Payne and Deuce McBride got the bulk of the bench backcourt minutes, which was as expected, though a decent chunk of them came in the extended garbage time that was the fourth quarter. 9 minutes and 13 seconds of Payne's 20 minutes and 43 seconds came in that time, scored 6 of his 11 points, 1 of his 3 boards, and 3 of his 4 assists. Granted, it's a really small sample size. But on a team lacking in depth, especially veteran depth, Payne's experience and ability to run an offense and knock down threes will be counted on, even if for the most part, his performance and production continues to fly under the radar.
Everything flies under the radar. And it's going to be very interesting to see overall, because you can't really predict what a bench does going into the season. So I have a feeling we'll see more names out there. I kind of like Tyler Kolek, but I don't know how quickly he'll adapt to the NBA staff, but we'll see. Anyway, let me just quickly go over best case scenario and worst case scenario for the Knicks. Best case scenario is that they gel almost immediately, pretty much exactly what I just say about Karl Anthony Towns early on. And this team hits the brakes and hits the gas and hits the gas quickly. And I'm talking really quickly. They won 50 games last year. The scenario I would have them winning 55 to 57, and they were 2 seed last year. They would be challenging Boston for the number 1 seed this year. That's why I said it's a best case scenario, not necessarily most likely scenario. In a conference that kind of right now, Boston won, everybody else jockeying from 2 to 5. That's at least in my opinion after seeing opening night and just seeing what the Celtics did last postseason. I think that the best case scenario for the Knicks right now is to get that 2 seed again and just kind of work from there. And if it's going to cost them a few games at the end of the season just to get themselves a little more healthy and not be in that position, that's how good they're going to have to do it. That's not going to be like, oh, Thibodeau has to rest this person. Not what Tibbs does. So it's going to have to be just kind of pedal to the metal at least early on, and obviously again from the tape on Tuesday. Worst case scenario is that this team is going to struggle, especially with gelling and injuries. OG Anunoby missed a decent amount of the season last year, especially, but when he played, Knicks really good. Knicks barely lost. Karl Anthony Towns would be my bigger worry in terms of injuries, and one of the things that wasn't really mentioned as much when that trade went down is Karl Anthony Towns' really inability to play a season of over 60 games. He doesn't do it often. So if that team, with the depth that they don't have currently, struggles. Now, we mentioned Dante DiVincenzo. Still a story considering all the jaw-jacking that he did almost 2 weeks ago now. at most likely what it seems to be Rick Brunson, of all people, did it to Tibbs, but that seemingly was jokingly. You're going to miss that because if any of the big stars go down, Brunson goes down for a significant part of time, if Hart goes down for a significant part of time, you don't have that dog in Dante DiVincenzo that can log the minutes and can get the big baskets for you. So, and if you miss Anunoby and Cat for extended amounts of time, you're going to get a 4 or a 5 seed at that point. And at that point, you're fighting from behind because, again, you're going to want to avoid Boston as much as you possibly can.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to play them right now because
in
the East, there is a clear divide between one and everybody else. And the Knicks are with Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Indiana. We can even add them in there too if we want to. That's what everybody else is right now. That's the logically place where the Knicks have to really aim for right now. So we'll see what happens. But a lot of hope and optimism for this Knicks season. Now, let's kill that optimism immediately. We're talking about the 2023-24 New York Brooklyn Nets. They started from the bottom and they didn't really go up too much, going 30-52, finding themselves out of any postseason. First time since pre-pandemic, 2018-2019. The 2024-25 Nets might be starting even lower than the bottom. Definitely not here. Breaking news. Mikal Bridges traded to that other team that we just talked about, and really a team that's developing under new head coach Jordi Fernandez, last seed, leading the Canadian Olympic basketball team to 5th place. That wasn't really a paragraph of optimism, was it? Anyway, the Nets are 0-1, mind you, after a much closer loss last night versus the Atlanta Hawks. Anthony, Star Watch, give me.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to be the Brooklyn Nets to be the 3rd most popular team in the borough of Brooklyn, but
I don't know if it's the 3rd most popular team in the borough of Brooklyn. St. Francis is starting soon.
Okay, 4th. Okay, the 4th most popular team
LIU might
be
there too. I'm going to give them credit.
Okay, fine. All right, we can't go any further than that. All right. Well, anyway, Nick Class is going to be the guy that I'm focusing on. Now, he did not play a single minute in the preseason. Came off the bench in the first game, played sparingly minutes, only to get ejected for drawing a flagrant 2. After he decided that close signing Dyson Daniels was a good idea out of frustration. In the offseason, he signed a 4-year, $100 million contract. And he's going to be looked at as one of the building pieces for the Nets. He's a guy who's shown he could be a double-double guy on a given night. averaged 12 and 10 last season, 2 blocks a game. Still kind of grown into his own as far as being what he's going to be as a true center. You love to see him develop more of an offensive game, maybe a mid-range jumper, something that allows him to be more of an offensive threat, and to be able to the Nets can run more plays for him outside of just lob passes and pick and roll screens to get to the basket. But here's the thing, and his ability to be a good passer needs to kind of come along a little further. He has shown that in small doses. But I alluded to him getting the flagrant two last night. They're looking at him to grow into being one of the team leaders in a rebuilding situation in a locker room that is really going to go through the growing pains this season, and that's not. And when you look at that situation, that's not a great start. And Class is going to have to. I mean, he's one of the holdovers from a roster that had a Kevin Durant and a Kyrie Irving, and even to some extent a James Harden in that locker room, and a Mikal Bridges just last season. And he's not. I mean, we think about this, how he played very well, held his own to some extent. I guess you want to be in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago, so the potential was there, but now it's going to be the maturation and and getting a flagrant two get thrown out of the game. Not a great start to it, but he's going to be looked at as someone who can develop into a really good player, maybe an all-star at some point. But the Nets kind of know what they have in the young class. They just want to see it develop, and this is what the season's going to be about. It's going to be about seeing his game grow further along, and what the Nets can do as far as build him up to be more of a two-way player. Because I think that's really the only thing that's missing from the class's game right now is being more. And we see it with the Knicks and Mitchell Robinson. It's like, okay, how good can you really be if you could be just a little more of an offensive presence? Because the defense and the rebound is certainly there, and we know he can finish around the basket. But can he develop something of a jump shot, anything of a post game that can make him more of a two-way player, all around center that the Nets are going to need as far as building this team, basically picking up the pieces from a big three era that left this organization with a lot of what ifs. And when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, they'll start with a blank canvas, and Nick Claxton is going to be one of those stencil pieces that the Nets are going to have to use to move forward.
Or as trade bait in the near future if they want to get more draft picks. Because honestly, we know how the NBA works. It's almost like a feeder system, although Claxton just got signed to a new contract. By the way, Ben Simmons playing a decent amount of the center position last night for the Nets due to Claxton's minutes restriction. And if you have a minutes restriction, that's probably the best time to get ejected because your minutes restriction will eventually run out. So that's actually perfect timing.
You know what? The next game, I'm going to have to set my DVR because I don't know how long Ben Simmons is going to stay on the court. So
stayed on the court for a while last night.
I know something about that.
But I want to savor the idea that Ben Simmons actually is an NBA ball player this season and not just a spectator who has a more expensive wardrobe than I have. I think I participated in more NBA games last season than Ben Simmons did, and that's a damn shame.
It's a low bar, Anthony. It's
you did not participate in an NBA game last year, so you're tied.
I spent more time on a basketball court last year than Ben Simmons, and I've been
That's true.
And I've been retired from competitive basketball for a while now.
You could have just walked through there. Anyway, let's talk about Star Olympian Dennis Schroeder under the radar.
Yeah, he's the under the radar player I'm looking at for the Nets. With all the talk about Cam Thomas, the aforementioned Nick Claxton, and the never-ending soap opera that is Ben Simmons, the Nets' nominal starting point guard has kind of flown under the radar. Schroeder's been the epitome of peripatetic. Look it up. Playing with 5 different teams since the 2020-21 season, including 2 stints with the Lakers after 5 seasons in Atlanta and 2 in OKC. His last 2 seasons with the Hawks and his his 2 seasons with the Thunder were the best stretch of his career. He put up a shooting slash line, 44.2 from the floor, 34.1 from downtown on 4.3 tries per game, 84.1 from the line. He averaged 17.8 points per game, 3.4 boards, 5.2 assists. That's just slightly under a 2.1 assist to turnover ratio on almost 31 minutes per game. His usage rate for that 4-year stretch was the best of his career at 27.3, and his player efficiency rating of 15.6 over that stretch included 3 years where it was 16.1 or better. He hasn't really hit anywhere close to those numbers since he became an NBA nomad. Now, Toronto traded him to the Nets on February 8th, and in 29 games with Brooklyn, he was better than serviceable. He took over as the starting point guard in his 6th game, and in those 24 consecutive starts, before sitting the last 2 games of the season, he put up a shooting slash line of 44.3 from the floor, 42.5% from 3 on 5.3 attempts per game, and 83.1 from the charity stripe. He averaged 16 points a game, 3.7 boards, and 6.5 assists against only 2.5 turnovers. That's a better than 2.5 to 1 ratio on 33.3 minutes per game. The Nets went 11-13 in those 24 starts. That's a .458 winning percentage for a team that overall won just 39% of their games, but 36% prior to Schrader's arrival. Overall, he led the team in assists and finished third on the team in scoring behind Cam Thomas, 22.5 per game, and the now departed Mikal Bridges, 19.6 points per game, who changed his stop on the number 2 train from Barclays Center to MSG. With Bridges gone, it's very likely that Schroeder's field goal attempts will go up from the 12.7 per game he averaged, and it's also likely that his usage rate will increase from the 21.8 he posted as a net, as Brooklyn looks to make up for the loss of those 19.6 points per game of offense that Bridges provided. If the increase in shot attempts and usage results in the version of Schroeder that we saw in that 4-year stretch between 2016-17 and 2019-2020, then the Nets will have a solid backcourt scoring option to pair with Thomas. A solid primary ball handler if Simmons is unavailable. The injured list does seem to be his second home these days. He's only played 57 games and has had 2 back surgeries since 2021. And a better secondary ball handler who can also play off the ball if Simmons actually makes it onto the court and stays on it. Schrader has plenty of experience playing off the ball with a facilitator like Simmons from those 2 stints in LA with LeBron. Those 3, along with the likes of Claxton, Cam Johnson, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Dorian Finney-Smith, could make the Nets somewhat competitive at the bottom of a top-heavy Eastern Conference. Then again, as John Hollinger of The Athletic wrote in his preview of the bottom half of the East, quote, "The Nets have just enough veteran talent on hand to lose respectably and avoid being historically terrible. But few of them will remain in the borough beyond the trade deadline." Point guard Dennis Schroeder, forwards Bojan Bogdanovic, and Dorian Finney-Smith are likely spending the first half of the season auditioning for their next employers, end quote. If it plays out like that for Schrader, who put up 13 points on 5 of 16 from the floor, including 2 of 6 from 3, along with 3 boards, 7 assists, but 5 turnovers, in 34 minutes in the Nets' opening night 120-116 loss to the Hawks in Atlanta, it would mean he stopped flying under the radar. I guess we'll see.
Okay. So I'm going to go again the way you just said. I'm going to go backwards in terms of the worst case scenario for the Brooklyn Nets. They have a lot of veterans on this team, and they have the possibility of being like a 32, 33 win team. That is bad, especially in the case of being a team that needs to get back into getting stars on this team. We're rebuilding. The pieces that you have there is not even going to be a play-in team. So being the 11 seed, just missing out on the play-in, kind of like they did last year, by far the worst case scenario for them, because it doesn't get them anywhere, and it puts them on a path of just being bad again in the future, because honestly, you're going to need to do a lot to get people to come to Brooklyn, because after the failed experiment of the big 3, and let's face it, it's a failure. They didn't even get to an Eastern Conference final. Doesn't become a very high attractive destination, especially when, again, I'm not saying this as a Knicks fan, I'm saying this as an honest to God person who's watching. This is by far the number 2 professional basketball option in this area, possibly number 3 behind the Liberty. So 32 to 33 wins is the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, I hate to say it, you're in a quiet position in the league. You don't have to be a laughingstock, but you need to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, and you need to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes immediately. And the best way to do that is to find your stars during the season, but allow them to shoot their way into and out of games. The perfect person to do that is Cam Thomas. The guy from LSU is the guy who scored 22.5 points per game towards the end of the season. He is a very good player, but he reminds me of a guy who just wants the ball every single time. Oh, and he's in a contract year. He's only paid $12 million this year. So he's going to be a net throughout the season, and he's going to want his money. Go ahead, big man, shoot more. And that's exactly what you want him to do, because you want to be more of a 22 to 23 win team. Not completely terrible, but you want to be in the position for those ping pong balls to fall the right way and get yourself a generational player, kind of like what Cooper Flag will be when he comes out after his 1 year at Duke. And let's be fair, unless he gets injured, he's playing 1 year at Duke. Be serious now for everything. Outside of that, I mean, you also have more people who are looking for new contracts this year. Brilliant. Zaire Williams is looking for a new contract. Day'Ron Sharp, who has been with the Nets God knows how long, is looking for a new contract. The recipe is there. You mentioned the trade deadline. You get rid of some of the veterans on this team and bring in even younger people who are looking to get more offense. Be fun and exciting. Not saying tank, but be fun and exciting and be exactly who you are. And don't care as much about the result as you think. Because eventually, the goal is to get the one thing that they did in this offseason is start to restock their draft capital. Now make the best of that draft capital and kind of build yourself a future for the next 3 to 4 years to come.
I would say this: if I'm on a Brooklyn Nets coaching staff, I sit the team down, I pop in a DVD copy of the movie Eddie, and point out Stacey Patton. I want all of you to tap into your inner Stacey Patton and just shoot into your heart desire. I'm not even going to bench you. Just go ahead, average 0.2 assists a game, and just shoot every time the ball comes in your area code at this point.
Standing ovation, if I could do it out loud. Standing ovation for the Eddie Patton. Brilliant. Just brilliant. All right, let's move on. Let's go around the NBA and preview 3 teams in each conference in the East. Try again. Let's go around the NBA and preview 3 teams in each conference to look at as championship contenders. Let's start with the East, which has been the property, and the NBA is currently also the property, of the Boston Celtics. They're the winners of this conference, or they were one win away from it in the last 3 seasons. But the chances of them going to the finals, going through the beast of the East with a 12-2 record in the playoffs, that's not happening again, is it? Is it? The New York Knicks, Milwaukee Bucks, Philadelphia 76ers, the Cleveland Cavaliers might have something to say about this. Jay, you always have something to say about those boys in Philadelphia, coached by Nick Nurse. Oh my God. Jay, you always have something to say about those boys in Philadelphia, coached by Nick Nurse. Talk about those Sixers.
Yeah, when we did our NBA draft recap show back on July 1, I talked about the big swing that Sixers head of basketball ops Daryl Morey made, signing free agent small forward Paul George. It was a move he had to make as Philly was in desperate need of a top-tier 2-way wing, a position that is key to being able to challenge the Celtics in the East, and another player to take some of the scoring load off the shoulders of center Joel Embiid and point guard Tyrese Maxey, especially on nights that Embiid would be unavailable, either to injury or load management to prevent injury. Embiid has hinted he's unlikely to play in any of the Sixers' 15 back-to-backs this season, which is why PG-13's own injury history coming back to bite Philly in the ass is not a good start to things. He suffered a bone bruise when he hyperextended his left knee during a preseason game. Neither he nor Embiid played on opening night in Philly's 124-109 loss to Milwaukee. Now, as we know, when healthy, Embiid, George, and Maxey is as good a big 3 as there is in the NBA. And them being healthy come April, May, and June is the only way the Sixers will have a chance to add a new Larry O'Brien trophy to the one that Dr. J and Moses Malone captured back in 1982-83. So Embiid not playing at all in the preseason and George banging up his knee in the preseason and both missing opening night, and Embiid may be out for the first week due to, as head coach Nick Nurse said, quote, the plan is why he's not playing. He did not re-injure himself, but the plan is we don't feel he's quite ready, strong enough, light enough, whatever it is. They determined he's not quite ready to go, hasn't been in any full court scrimmages, etc., and that's the plan. If the plan sounds a little weirdly like the process, you're not alone in thinking so. It's to the point where the NBA is actually launching an investigation into why Embiid's being held out.
By the way, we mentioned, I was with Anthony yesterday. We mentioned the fact that it's almost like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, and just getting the gumshoes on the case immediately being like, why is Joel Embiid being held out for this long?
I think Adam Silver has nothing better to do, right? But I digress. The stat most frequently used last season surrounding Embiid wasn't his 34.7 points per game, which was a career high, as was his 38.8% three-point shooting on 3.6 attempts per game, or his 5.6 assists. No, the stat most frequently used was his 39 games played after undergoing in-season left knee surgery. That's his lowest total since the 31 he played way back in 2016-17, his first year back after missing his first 2 seasons with injuries. Philly was 31-8 in the games Embiid played. That's a .795 winning percentage. 16-27 in the games he missed. That's a .372 winning percentage. Embiid lost 25 to 30 pounds, so I don't know how much lighter they expect him to get, with the hope to lose more, and will continue to wear a brace on his left knee, despite it being something he would prefer not to do, but hoping it'll keep the knee as structurally stable and as protected as possible. Not so much that he could play something close to the 66 games he played in his MVP season of 2022-23, but so he can be as close to 100% as possible for the playoffs, which he was not last season. The Sixers said Tuesday that Embiid is, quote, responding well to his individual plan, there's that word again, and is expected to ramp up his return to play activities this week, including scrimmaging. George actually had the reverse situation as he played 74 games last season. He topped the 70 game, the most since he topped the 70 game mark since 2018-19 when he finished a 4-year run of averaging 78 games per season between his last 2 seasons in Indiana and his first 2 seasons in OKC. They were also the most productive stretch of his career. He averaged 24.4 points, 6.8 boards, and 3.7 assists, 1.9 steals, and 36 minutes per game, with a shooting slash line of 43.6 from the floor, 38.8 from beyond the arc on 7.8 attempts per game, and 85.3 from the stripe. He made the All-Star team each year, made All-NBA 3 times, All-Defense twice, and got top 5 votes for both Defensive Player of the Year and MVP. He averaged 33.8 minutes per game this past year with the Clippers, put up 22.6 points per game, 5.2 boards, 3.5 assists, and 1.5 steals with a career-high shooting slash line, 47.1 from the floor, 41.3 from 3, so on 7.9 attempts per game, and 90.7% from the free throw line, made an all-star team for the 9th time. The hope was that he'll be able to take the court Friday night in Toronto. Now, with both Embiid and George in street clothes on opening night, the entire offensive burden was left to Maxey, a first-time All-Star last season and the reigning NBA Most Improved Player, after he averaged 25.9 points and 6.2 assists against just 1.7 turnovers, which is a better than 3.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio last season, on 45% shooting from the floor, 37.3 from beyond the arc on 8.1 attempts per game, and 86.8 from the charity stripe. That was his shooting slash line. He showed out in the 5-game first-round playoff series against the Knicks when he was the focal point of the offense due to Embiid's lack of availability and the dearth of other consistent scoring options. He played 44.5 minutes per game. He shot 47.8 from the floor, 40% from 3 on over 9 attempts per game, and 89.3 from the line. He averaged 29.8 points per game, 5.2 boards, and 6.8 assists with a better than 3 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. He did all he could in that series, just like he did all he could against the Bucks Wednesday night, playing 39 minutes, scoring 25 points, but on an awful 10 of 31 from the floor, including 2 of 9 from 3. But both situations are why more help was needed so that Philly was not totally at the mercy of their MVP center's availability, let alone their newly acquired third star. That's why Morey re-signed veterans Kelly Oubre Jr., who was a solid 15.4 game scorer last year at the small forward spot. He had 21 on opening night. And Kyle Lowry, who was solid as a backup point guard and running mate for Maxey last season and had a solid 13.6 assist, no turnover night against the Bucks. He also signed veteran free agent guards Eric Gordon and Reggie Jackson and veteran free agent forwards KJ Martin and Caleb Martin. Caleb gave Philly 12 points and 9 boards against Milwaukee. They also signed veteran free agent center Andre Drummond, who should provide better insurance for Embiid than Paul Reed did last year, at least in the rebounding and defensive areas. In the preseason, Drummond grabbed 28.8% of available rebounds, easily the highest rate among the 432 players who averaged at least 10 minutes in at least 2 preseason games or more. And he pulled down 13 in just 25 minutes of action against the Bucks. Morey also added French Olympic star Gershon Yabusele after the Paris games to add depth to the power forward and center spots. Now, these are all solid NBA rotation players. They've played a combined 47 seasons in the NBA and will serve the Sixers better when they're able to play the roles they were actually signed for, not having to try and make up the production of not one, but 2 All-Stars. The other player to keep an eye on is rookie guard Jared McCain out of Duke, who, like Embiid and George, missed opening night due to a pulmonary contusion in a rough fall he took in a preseason game last Wednesday against the Brooklyn Nets that could sideline him for a while. He'd made 38% of his threes in the preseason prior to the injury, giving the team hope that he could add even more depth to what's shaping up to be a pretty solid roster behind the big 3 once he's able to return to action. Look, bottom line, despite the solid roster that Morey's put together, the success or failure of the Sixers season is wholly dependent on the chemistry that Embiid, George, and Maxey build with each other and the production and wins that'll come from it. But all 3 need to be on the court at the same time for as much of the regular as possible in order for that to happen. Best case scenario is they're mostly healthy and produce enough wins for a top 3 seed, allowing them to avoid the Celtics until the Eastern Conference Finals. The worst case scenario is Embiid and PG-13 spend more time on the bench than the hardwood, and Philly winds up in the play-in, if they're lucky, and wind up playing the Celtics in round 1 shorthanded if they get out of it. Nothing else. This season will not be boring in the city of brotherly love, boys.
Maxey, by the way, last night needed 18 field goal attempts to get to the line, which is something that he is going to have to work on as the season
it would help if
continues.
Help.
It would help if he had some help, but he also was very, very frustrated last night in terms of just driving and not getting calls. By the way, Drummond's second tour of duty. I do not know why Philly should always have had him around. He's a perfect backup for Embiid. We'll see what happens in the future.
Drummond was ring chasing. It's why he left.
Well, I mean, the Sixers are also a good place to ring chase too. So, I mean, got one of the generational players. So,
I definitely approved the pickup. I mean, I liked Paul Reed. I think he's going to develop into a solid rotation player. But when the drop off from Embiid to him, huge. Drummond's not going to score you a lot of points. You know,
but he's a big rebounder. Huge.
But he's a big rebounder. He can protect the rim. He's just got to be careful with the ball because he can be turnover prone.
Anthony, Giannis and those boys in Milwaukee. Giannis likes to show some shit to try to get Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to kind of fight against. Jaylen Brown was the big star on Boston. And hey, Milwaukee has a good product on the court too, as we saw.
Yeah, I mean, look, was there a more drama-filled team last season than the Milwaukee Bucks? I mean, you think about how the season started. When Adrian Griffin has the head coach, halfway through the season, he's fired. They're bringing Doc Rivers. They actually have a worse record when Doc Rivers is coaching the team, and they bottom out in the first round of playoffs in the second straight season. This time at the hands of an Indiana Pacers team that embarrassed them in the in-season tournament in semifinals. So maybe there was a growing trend that we didn't pick up on right away. But then you look at last season, though, Damian Lillard didn't join the Bucks until really the start of the season due to that trade. He struggled on the court as far as finding his way. He also had some personal issues going on off the court. And to his own admission, said that was kind of hardest adjustment he ever had to go through. Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, played like an all-star, but he got injured. But he went down with the calf injury, and he missed a great part of that playoff series against Indiana. And also, we look at guys like Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez. They're on the wrong side of 30. And this team that just like 3 years ago won an NBA championship has aged fast. I just kind of tell you how the NBA can age you in dog years because it seemed like everyone got old almost overnight outside of Giannis. Uh, Lillard's 34, Lopez is 35, and Chris Middleton's actually the youngest at 33. So they're getting a little longer too for that as far as that core, who by the way have $152 million committed to all four guys. In the offseason, excuse me, the Bucks added Gary Trent Jr., Torian Prince, and Dion Wright. Those are guys who have been able to lock playoff minutes. And in case of Torian Prince, I keep contributing to the Lakers for the most part the last couple of seasons. But when you look at this team and the best case, worst case scenario is that, and we saw open night, that Damian Lillard could be the Damian Lillard of old and maybe take over games in the fourth quarter when needed. That Giannis can be back to basically be typical Giannis. But Chris Middleton has been out. Brook Lopez is day to day. So again, injuries and health is going to be an issue with this team. And also, when you look at the Bucks, the guy really in the bullseye right now is Doc Rivers, because we've seen Doc Rivers be a good coach, and we also see teams kind of fall apart under Doc Rivers. In many cases, yeah, I'm sorry, Jay, but and Doc Rivers, by the way, he left a really cushy job being a broadcaster and decided to get back into coaching.
Ego.
Yeah, right. All ego. But yeah, best case scenario for the Bucks is simply getting back, being the Milwaukee Bucks and being back to one of the league teams in basketball, and maybe challenging for the number 2, number 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. A worst case scenario is going to be another first round exit, a lower seed, and possibly Giannis kind of questioning his future in Milwaukee. I mean, there's only so much you can and look, and give Giannis credit. He's been one of the guys who's been open about wanting to stay in one team his whole career. But when you look at what has happened to the Bucks since that championship, and death being a major issue with this team, and also getting older, the injuries starting to kick in. Giannis is having a hard time even staying on the court these days. I mean, is this possibly the sign of the door closing in Milwaukee? I mean, it's an interesting question to ask as you watch the Bucks team as the season progresses. But if they could get the chemistry together, obviously we saw opening night's a small sample size, and granted, it was
especially against the short-handed team.
Yeah, a 6 team that was very short-handed, and Tyrese Maxey pretty much was a one-man show offensively. He was the only guy who could do anything offensively. Again, it's gonna be a time will tell. Let's see when this team is. I say Christmas Day, and whether or not this is a Milwaukee Bucks team that could be seriously looked at as a team we thought they were going to be a year ago, or the team that they actually became when the season ended last year in the first round.
Darvin Ham, by the way, back as Doc Rivers' top assistant, so it'll be interesting to see how that relates to everything, because he was a big part of those good Milwaukee teams and that championship coaching staff. Okay. So what does the great wrestler Ric Flair say? To be the man, you have to beat the man, and the man right now is the Boston Celtics. It is how do you improve upon 64 wins in the title? Don't answer that now. You have time, but interesting enough that the Boston Celtics now have little chips on their shoulders after going 64-18 and only losing a couple of games in the Eastern Conference and 3 games in the entire playoffs last year. Very simply put, you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the 2 stars, now have little chips on their shoulders, both due to the Olympics. Jason Tatum did not play well, did not get a lot of minutes in the Olympics. Jaylen Brown did not even make the team, even though, he just won MVP of the finals. Go figure. This is a team that didn't really use a lot of Kristaps Porzingis in the postseason, and probably will not be using him again, probably until 2025. But he is the secret weapon. in the holster, and you can fire at any time. This team has continuity. Pretty much everybody re-signed. They got Lonnie Walker the fourth in free agency as well. New contracts for Jason Tatum, new contract for Derek White, who was probably one of the best deadline acquisitions of all time.
Hands down.
Boston Celtics have not repeated since 1968, 1969. So I can't tell you that they're going to repeat easily. They could have bad luck. They could have injury. They could have Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum go into too much all ego mode. But expect this team to start fast. You saw what happened on opening night where they pretty much destroyed the Knicks. 18-4, Boston has been in October and November in 22 and 23. And as you saw, this team lives and dies by the 29 three-pointers, which is tied an NBA record for three-pointers in that opening night game against the New York Knicks. And the only reason why it was a tie at 29 is because they missed their last 13 three-point shots. Come on, couldn't get one more to fall down. This is a team that is so many storylines going in. Joe Mazzulla proved himself to be a pretty good coach last year and guiding this team to a championship, best record and everything else. There's very few holes on this Boston Celtics team, and the only team right now that could beat the Boston Celtics is the Boston Celtics. Let's see what happens as the season goes through.
Yeah, by the way, Rabbi, you mentioned the Celtics playoff record last year, 12-2. And for the people out there who are thinking they'll never
16-3, by the way, 12-2 in the Eastern Conference.
For the people out there who don't think that a championship team can kind of run the gauntlet in that fashion again, go back to the 2000 Lakers and see how hard it was to struggle to get the first championship. And then the following year, they only lost one game in the entire postseason. And it took a superstar, Allen Iverson, to do it in the game one of the finals. So there was precedent to see a championship team get better the next year and almost unbeatable. If opening night is an indicator, this Celtics team is going to be a tall order regardless of when you run into them in the postseason, whether it's round one or even the conference finals. I mean, this Celtics team, if they're shooting the way they shot opening night when they're hitting 29 three-pointers the game is over by the second quarter. This is going to be a really dominant Celtic team that is going to be. I don't know who's going to match up well unless the Knicks can stay healthy, unless the Sixers and the Bucks can become the team we expect them to be.
It's an 82 game.
Or maybe even Cleveland out of be a dark horse. Who knows? But the Celtics right now are kind of they're the standard in the Eastern Conference without question.
Standard in the NBA, honestly, because of the fact that the West are kind of like the Hunger Games. The East is really right now ruled by the Celtics, and that leads them to kind of rule the NBA. Speaking of the Hunger Games, let's volunteer as tribute and head over to the West, where one game separated first and third in the regular season standings from a year ago, 2 games separated 4th through 7th, 1 game separated 8th through 10th. To say the West cannibalize each other is the understatement of the millennium. Oh, and did I forget to mention that the up-and-coming Houston Rockets, the Memphis Grizzlies, who only finished as bad as they did last year due to no real time of Ja Morant, and the Spurs, with only the most dynamic defensive rookie season of all time a year ago, not even part of the 10 teams that I kind of described before in 23-24. Yikes. Jay, let's start with the defending conference runners-up. We mentioned the Minnesota Timberwolves earlier in this program with Karl-Anthony Towns coming into New York. But let's talk about who's coming out of New York and the rest of the defending Western Conference runners-up.
Yeah, you talk about Boston, Rabbi. Somewhere Red Auerbach is smiling, laughing his ass off, and puffing a cigar.
As he would usually do. I think he's always puffing a cigar regardless of the situation, whether it's stress, whether it's happiness, or it's just Red Auerbach loves to smoke.
Happiness this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the T-Wolves, Minnesota made the leap from 42-40 in a first-round playoff loss to Denver in the 2022-23 season to 56-26 in a trip to the Western Conference Finals before bowing out to Dallas last season. In the wake of that success, they traded arguably their second-best player, power forward Karl Anthony Towns, who averaged 21.8 points, 8.3 boards, and 3 assists while shooting 50.4 from the floor. 41.6 from 3 on 5.3 attempts per game and 87.3% from the line to the New York Knicks for a similar player, at least offensively, in power forward Julius Randle. That's the headline. But there are those of us who think the key piece for Minnesota in that trade was combo guard Dante DiVincenzo, who would seem to be a solid additional backcourt partner for rising star Anthony Edwards, who had an all-NBA second team worthy season, scoring 25.9 points per game on a 46.1 field goal percentage, 35.7 three-point percentage on 6.7 per game, and an 83.6 free throw shooting percentage slash line with 5.4 boards, 5.1 assists, 1.3 steals, and 35.1 minutes per game. Adding DiVincenzo, who I noted in our Knicks segment, averaged 15.5 points per game in just 29.1 minutes and knocked down his 8.7 three-point attempts per game at a 40.1% clip, can defend, and took on a lot of the secondary ball handling and playmaking responsibilities to a bench that includes big man Naz Reid, the reigning sixth man of the year, shooting guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker, rookie point guard Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky, rookie shooting guard Terrence Shannon Jr. out of Illinois, and veteran small forward Joe Ingles, who's a career 41% sharpshooter from beyond the arc. The T-Wolves bench has a chance to be one of the best in the NBA, backstopping a starting five of Edwards, 17-year vet Mike Conley at the point, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year and consistent double-double machine Rudy Gobert at center, Randle at the 4, and defensive pest Jaden McDaniels at the 3. Now, Randle, who averages 4.7 assists in his 5 years in New York, though he can be a ball stopper at times, and DiVincenzo, who averages 3.9 assists per 36 minutes with an assist-to-turnover ratio of almost 2.2 to 1 for his career, and put up 6.9 assists per 36 minutes with an assist-to-turnover ratio of 4.25 to 1 in the preseason, should give the T-Wolves some additional playmakers to take some of the weight off Edwards, and especially the 37-year-old Conley, who should need to play as many back-to-backs as he did last season, 10 out of the 13. DiVincenzo's addition to the roster also allows the team not to have to rush the development of either of their rookie guards. Now, Randle, who has a plus handle for a big and has an array of moves that can get him any shot he wants, though he can be streaky, is an ideal candidate to be the offensive alpha when the second unit enters the game, especially alongside DiVincenzo. The hope is that the combination results in an improvement on the offensive end for the T-Wolves, who are 18th in points per game at 113 and 16th in offensive efficiency at 115.6 per 100 possessions. Minnesota was the NBA's number one defensive team last season, no surprise, with Gobert protecting the rim and Edwards and McDaniels on the perimeter. They allowed just 106.5 points per game and 109 points per 100 possessions. And in all likelihood will be near the top of the rankings again this season, but what will bear watching is if Randle, not noted as a defensive stalwart, gets subbed out in the fourth quarter of tight games. Now, the T-Wolves got off to a rough start, losing to the Lakers 110-103 on opening night. They played 9, but the bulk of the minutes went to Edwards, who led with 41, Gobert 35, Randle 34, and DiVincenzo with 31 off the bench. And while both Alexander Walker, 28, and Reed, 26, played more than half the game off the bench, Connolly, 20, and McDaniel, 16, largely due to foul trouble, played less than half. Ingles was the ninth man, and all of his 6 minutes and 48 seconds came in the second quarter. They didn't shoot well from either the floor, 41.2%, or downtown, 31.7 on 41 attempts, and they turned it over 16 times. Edwards had 27 to lead them, but on 10 of 25 from the floor, 5 of 13 from 3. And though they had 6 in double figures, no one else had more than Randle's 16 on just 10 field goal attempts. DiVincenzo had 10, but he shot just 3 of 11 and 2 of 8 from 3. Yeah, it's a really small sample size. And as I said earlier, it'll probably take until Christmas before we truly see if the two former Knicks have or have not gelled with the returning T-Wolves core from last season. But when I think it's all said and done, Minnesota will still wind up as a top 6 seed in the West.
By the way, they're playing right now, ironically enough, and Julius Randle dropped 25 in the first half for the Timberwolves, which is a little surprising considering that. And also, Jaden McDaniels really did not play a lot in that first game. Nas Reed with 11, by the way. But it's kind of funny because I think Julius Randle might be really the biggest hit or miss out there. And I was talking earlier about Karl Anthony Towns adjusting to the new system of the Knicks. Might be a little more different with Randle adjusting to the new system of the Timberwolves. We say stars are going to star, but that's a much different adjustment. Also, I'm
Yes.
curious to see what'll happen when Dante DiVincenzo plays a true bench role, which he didn't really play mostly past January of last year because he was needed in the starting lineup. So let's see what happens.
Well, I mean, he's going to play a bench role, Rabbi, but I can still see him depending on Connolly's situation and the matchup on any given night. You know, he may come off the bench to start the game, but he could easily play 30 minutes on night simply coming off the bench.
But the one thing I noticed last year with DiVincenzo with the Knicks is he needs to be fed, and there's a lot of mouths to feed on this team, and he is probably fifth at the table. So let's see what happens as we go on.
Fifth? I don't know.
Fourth or fifth at the table. Fourth or fifth at the table. I think you want to feed Edwards. You want to feed Randall.
Yeah.
You may also even want to feed Reed because Reed has such a huge future. So you're already putting him. He's already fourth at the table. Gobert is better in matchups. So it's fourth and fifth, but it's lower at the table than he was in January through May with the Knicks last year. That's for sure.
We'll see.
Anthony, a lot of people are sleeping on the Nuggets. They just won a Larry O'Brien trophy not even 2 years ago. Can they do it again?
Well, they're playing right now. Actually, they're playing OKC and got the game
in
on.
Both games season opener, but both teams season opener, by the way.
Yeah, but here's the thing about the Denver Nuggets. It's just 2 short years ago. Obviously, they were the NBA champions, but like the Milwaukee Bucks, they're kind of suffering the downside to win the championship. The fact that everyone's going to get paid. In the last 2 years, they lost some key pieces that helped them win that championship. Bruce Brown, Jeff Green both left, obviously via free agency 2 years ago, and this summer they lost KCP, Reggie Jackson as well, who was big contributors last season. But they still have the core four as far as Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr. When you add, obviously, Jokic and Jamal Murray is still one of the best 1-2 pick-and-roll combinations in the NBA, bar none. You added Porter Jr.'s athleticism, Aaron Gordon's ability to play multiple positions. This is a team, a core that outscores the opponent by 14.5 points per 100 meaningful possessions per game last season. That was without KCP in the lineup. Now here's the downside. They are really thin in the depth department, much like the Milwaukee Bucks or the Denver Nuggets are in that same scenario. Last year, they relied on Christian Braun, a lot of young players coming off that bench to chip in. Didn't quite work out. They knocked out in round 2 in 7 games by Minnesota. This year, they're now relying on a former MVP, kind of a journeyman, Russell Westbrook, to come off the bench to get us some kind of spark. Westbrook comes in with his own problems. He's a volume shooter, always been his whole career. And also a guy who's now more willing to play a role off the bench, but how exactly does he gel if he has to play starter minutes? And also, you have to worry about the health of a guy like Jamal Murray, a guy who has missed games. While he says the knee issues was not a factor in this past summer's Olympics and him not playing so well, and obviously Canada as a whole didn't play so well in the Olympics. It's something it's kind of something to take to kind of pay attention to, because this is a Nugget team that is one key injury away from being significantly thinner in the Western Conference. And Rabbi, you mentioned it's a bit of a gauntlet. They're gonna need all the manpower and bodies they're gonna get to kind of get out to at least finish in the top 6 as far as playoff position and trying to stay on that the ever dreadful playoff playing tournament. So for the Nuggets, if they can stay healthy, they can finish top 3, top 4 easy. You saw how close the Western Conference was top to bottom from 1 to 10. But the worst case scenario is the team bottoms out around 1 and front office decides to hit the reset button around Jokic and Jamal Murray and try to figure out if they can get some more additional pieces. I mean, this it's the NBA. I mean, things change so drastically nowadays. Um, well, a team like the Nuggets could go from hoisting the Larry Bryant Trophy to possibly one injury away from being a playing team or even a
By the
one and
way,
done team.
what you just mentioned was basically what the Nuggets were the years before they won the title in 2023 because of Jamal Murray's health. Yeah, that's the one injury away. But I feel like if that team, because Murray played a decent amount last year, I think the two biggest problems were the fact that the team did not have as much depth as they usually do. Losing Contavious Caldwell Pope was a big reason why they kind of made a little bit of a downside. And they found a team that was essentially the Nugget stoppers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And ironically enough, one of the reasons why that game seven was they blew that 20-point lead was the defense of Karl Anthony Towns, ironically enough. It was a matchup nightmare out there. But I feel like if you have Nikola Jokic out there and you have four plumbers, I think you can still work your way out of a play-in spot. That's how good Nikola Jokic is. He is the best player in the world for a reason. He wakes up and he can give you a double-double pretty
Yeah.
simply put. And he probably is thinking about horses half the time while he's doing it too, ironically enough. Okay. The Oklahoma City Thunder, just 2 years ago, were a team that were young, were building, they got into the play-in, and then last year it's like a little bit more heightened expectations. They were pretty much the best team of the Western Conference last year. They really, really grew right in front of our eyes, and this year is no different. Obviously, you know about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. He is now one of the best players in the league. He was a 54% shooter. If you have 30 points per game and you have 54% shooting, you're making the most out of your time on the court. And he also had 6.2 assists per game. So he is one of the true point guards in this league. It didn't start out that way. Now he really makes everything go on that team. You have three respected players on that team. Jalen Williams, Jale, Ed Williams. They still employ both Jalen Williams on that team. Was a big improvement. And Chet Holmgren was a unicorn and exactly what we thought last year in terms of just doing everything on the court. So if Victor Wembanyama didn't exist, he would have had one of the best defensive seasons to start an NBA career. And so you add all of that. Then they had two little additions that might actually give them a 58 or 59 win season this year. Losing Josh Giddey, who's been a very talented player, but has had some struggles on the court and some struggles legally. And he got shipped to the Bulls for Alex Caruso, who, if he can stay healthy, is one of the biggest dogs in the NBA. He will do everything defensively for you, and he will do a ton of good for that team, most likely playing off the bench this year. But he is a guy who you will probably also see in crunch time if necessary. Then you got Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency. Now he's going to start the year on the injured list because he got injured about a week ago. So he might be out for the first month or two. But considering the improvements he made on the New York Knicks, and it's one of the best free agent signings the Knicks ever made for doing it for about 2 for $20 million and getting him to become a guy who was almost a 3 for $90 million player, because he gives you hustle out there, he can give you minutes. He's a 34 to 35 minute guy. He can get you a double double pretty easily when he is healthy. And he is the perfect person to kind of really gain more size, more defensive ability out there. And what you have from Mark Daigneault's team is a team that is about a year ahead of the schedule that I think they initially thought. This was the year that we're going to start to make the leap. Now this is the year that they're going to become a team that's going to stay on top. They had a great 6-game series last year with the Dallas Mavericks where they got torched in a lot of different areas by the Kyrie and especially Luka Doncic combination. By the way, we're not even talking about the defending Western Conference champions in this segment. That's how stacked this Western Conference is. Love to seeing the Thunder play. They are one of the best watches the NBA. And world, look out, because that team, if they get 50 to 55 points a night from Chet Holmgren and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right now they have 37 points, pretty much not even before the third quarter is done. And you have a bench that has Aaron Wiggins, Alex Caruso, and eventually we'll have Isaiah Hartenstein playing. I'm telling you, this is a possible Western Conference Finals team, and a possible team that could at least win the conference. By the way, I know we didn't put it on a rundown, but does anybody have predictions for your NBA Finals?
Ooh.
Boy. I was gonna kind of add to OKC. I mean, you see them getting after it tonight defensively. When they get Hartenstein, and that's why as a big fan, it pains me to see Isaiah Hartenstein leave. But hey, go get your money. I mean, big guy, you earned it.
Absolutely.
You think about all of the key plays he was able to do. First of all, not just giving the Knicks something offensively from the center position, but also his rebounding. They think about the big moments he was part of, the key block on Tyrese Maxey after that frantic game 2 comeback towards the end. Being able to try to hold his own against Joel Embiid, and then in the Indiana series, being a shot blocker and a surprising pick and roll pick and roll guy, playing off of the over Bronson and into a stand Dante DiVincenzo. Now he's gonna have Holmgren and SGA to play off as well. OKC's gonna be a really good team. I mean, they're gonna be a fun team to watch.
Of course.
And obviously, everyone's picked to get out of the Western Conference. I mean, that's good.
Are they your pick to
tough.
Are they your pick to get out of the Western Conference?
Ooh, I don't really. I wasn't really thinking about predictions. I really do believe the Celtics are kind of the beast of the East in the Eastern Conference. And it hurts me to say that as a Knicks fan, but in the Western Conference, it's anybody's ball game. I mean, we didn't talk about the Mavericks, and they're the defending Western Conference champions. I just tell you just how stacked this Western Conference is, and what 3-4 games separated 1 from 10 last season. I mean, you can in the West. We even talked about what happens to Pelicans to stay healthy, and Zion Williamson can stay on the court. What about the Grizzlies and John Morant actually becomes the John Morant from 2 years ago before the off-court issues? The Rock is improving. The Lakers are a team that you don't want to run into in the playoffs under any circumstances, even if they're just no more than a playing team. I mean, this Western Conference is just a murderous row that's going to be hard to predict. It's going to be really hard to predict 1 week into the NBA season.
Yeah. All right. So you went right through the stop sign and just didn't make a prediction. Perfectly fine. Go ahead, Jeff.
I agree with the both of you that there is in the East there's and as a Sixers fan, like you guys as Knicks fans, it pains me as a New Yorker. It pains me to give props to any sports team from Boston. But right now, and the way you put it at the top, Rabbi, is spot on. In the East, there's Boston and there's everybody else, and who knows how 2 through 6 is going to shake out. That could change. Who knows? I mean, I think the teams that are going to be in that mix are kind of obvious. It's Philly, it's Milwaukee, it's Orlando, it's Cleveland, it's Indiana. They're going to be in that mix with the Knicks, for the round out the top half. But I definitely think in the East, it's Boston's conference to lose. I don't see them having enough holes unless there's a, catastrophic injury. Ideally, they want to get KP back and, run him out there for some minutes so you're not overextending Al Horford early in the season. You kind of want to have Al rested and, ready to go in the playoffs where, he always seems to make the right play for them. In the West, I mean, look, it's real easy to look at OKC and just say it's their time, right? They have all the pieces on paper. There's not this team's resume when you look at their roster and what they've done, and has Western Conference finalists, all over it. As Anthony's right, we didn't even talk about Dallas. Dallas is intriguing to me. So for one name and one name only, and that's Klay Thompson. How much of Game 6 Klay is still left in that body of his? He doesn't have to be the splash bro. He's arguably no better than number 3 in the offensive pecking order in that team behind Luka and Kyrie. But does that actually benefit him? He'll wind up getting more open looks. He doesn't have to carry this team like he had to do for stretches in Golden State in his prime. But, is late stage career Klay, if he's healthy, is he enough to be that extra piece, that extra consistent offensive piece that Dallas did not have last year, right? It's really interesting. And I agree with you. The West is going to beat themselves up. The team that's standing at the end may be the team that just has to deal with less attrition, be it injuries, slumps, whatever. Running it back is hard. To me, it's a toss-up between OKC and Dallas coming out of the West. I don't right now, as Anthony said, we're not even a full week in. It's hard for me to make a pick either way. I have both of them on equal footing. If I had to give an edge, you want to put me on the spot, slight edge to OKC because, everybody's healthy and what they have. But yeah, Dallas with Ed and Klay, if he's the missing piece and he gets some late career rejuvenation playing alongside, Luka and Kyrie, we could just as easily have a rematch of the NBA Finals come this spring.
By the way, 6 of 10 tonight for Klay from 3. So playing Klay, which was 0 for 10, by the way, in his last game as a Golden State Warrior, trying to get far away from those memes as possible. Celtics Suns. Pay attention to Phoenix this year now with a real coach and Mike Budenholzer.
All right.
Leading the charge. Just saying. All right. Finally tonight, the New York Liberty, original WNBA franchise in 1997, finally made their 6th franchise try at a WNBA championship, a successful one. A 67-62 overtime victory over the Minnesota Lynx on Sunday night finally made a winner of someone who plays at Brooklyn. Took long enough. The parade happened today in New York to celebrate the new champions of the WNBA's most fruitful season yet, and that's probably going to lead to a labor stoppage in 2024. Just in 2025. Just great. Final thought, Mr. Strait, as the party happened mere blocks from where you sit right now.
You know what? This is 28 years to make it. And Jay, obviously you're a Liberty fan just as I am. Rabbi, you've been in Liberty games. It was great to see some of the original New York Liberty players from Rebecca Lobo called the game for ESPN, obviously, but to see Sue Wicks and Teresa Weatherspoon in attendance, and obviously Kim Hampton's worked with the Liberty organization for a number of years now. And you think about what this team has gone through. I mean, they were in 4 of the first 6 WNBA finals and a coach showing. It took and in 20 years, it took them to get back to the finals last season. This is a team that was, that had to play games in the Prudential Center, Radio City Music Hall, when a guard was going through renovations. At one point, it was sold, and was pretty much jettisoned to playing the games in Westchester County, and kind of and to see Joe's side and obviously business side buy the team and invest into not just the team but women's sports in general, and bringing the team to Brooklyn and kind of to a team that one of the founding one of the founding organizations of the WNBA, and a fan base that was already here that just couldn't go to games of Westchester because it's so far away. And you just kind of see this organization just get a breath of new life and fresh air. And it started with drafted Sabrina Ionescu in 2020. Um, and then and then you see in 2021 the starting to get back to the postseason. And then last year we see Breonna Stewart and Jacquel Jones, a former MVP in her own right, coming over. Courtney Vandersloot, winning the championship with Chicago just a couple years prior to, being kind of that foundation. And I think what really set this team was watching the Aces celebrate a championship on their home court just last year. And you think about the WNBA season as a whole. I mean, this is a banner year. We saw a rookie class that was unbelievable between Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. We saw record attendance, TV viewership. We saw a Minnesota Lynx team that people thought was kind of going through a rebuild, finding a way, people grinding their way to a final game, to a WNBA finals. We saw Asia Wilson put on a historic MVP season. But for the New York Liberty, to finally hoist the championship after so long and really being the last original team to win one. I mean, especially when you consider a team that beat them multiple times no longer exists. Uh, it says a lot about what this organization have been able to go through, and watching the parade today and seeing some of the celebration not far from me at the Parking Center earlier tonight. Um, you just can't help but tip your hat to the organization, the fans in particular, Ellie, who is never short on dare steps and swag for that matter.
Oh.
And even brought back Maddie for the celebration. That just tells you how far this organization has had to come, and to be where they are now. I think it's just an icing on the cake for a team that, and just for as a whole WNBA. It's been a shining example of what happens when you do pay attention, when you do invest in the power of women's sports, but also what the younger generation have to look to and to look forward to as well, and to say, hey, that could be me one day, or it's possible.
Yeah.
And that's some of the things that I really am very happy to see, as far as the Liberty and the league as a whole be able to achieve this season. So, like I say, I'm always looking forward to what comes next. Hopefully, not at least I won't stop it, Rabbi, but hopefully, being able to build on this season and to see what the rookies do in year two, how the Liberty are going to defend, or the Aces going to come back with a vengeance, and also what happens with the Sun, the Lynx, Atlanta
And the
Dream
Fever of
Team,
it, and the Fever,
the,
obviously.
the Fever, obviously, Clark and Boston, year two of that tangent. So it's the
Let
WNBA
me
really have a lot to look forward to going into next season.
let me say something real quick before I go into this. Is a needed labor stoppage though, because of the fact that these players are getting paid far less than what this league is now worth, considering what the new TV deals from NBC and ESPN and Amazon are about to be giving them. There is a reason why they opted out here, and there is a reason why they will be going to the negotiating table this year, and there is a reason why the W is going to probably have to pay up or risk a labor stoppage at what is right now probably the league's most fruitful period in their history. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, it's a seminal point. After a seminal season in terms of star power and viewership numbers, is now leading to a seminal moment in women's sports in terms of labor negotiations. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. As far as the Liberty winning the title, finally, I mean, it wasn't pretty. Neither Breanna Stewart nor Sabrina Ionescu had a good night shooting the basketball in Game 5. But the Liberty came out on top of a rock fight of a final series to get their first WNBA title. Stewie, one of two former MVPs and champions in the starting five, shot only 32.6% from the floor, just 25% from three. Sabrina shot just 29.6 from the floor, and an even worse 24.3 from three. Stewie averaged 18.6 points per game for the series, mostly by going 25 of 31, a little under 81% from the line. She stuffed the stat sheet, though. I give her credit. She did everything else you'd expect of a star. 10.8 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 2.4 steals, 2.2 blocks. Sabrina averages 12.4 points per game, well below her season average of 18.2. Her 5.4 assists, well below her season average of 6.2. But she averaged 20.7 points per game in the first two rounds of the playoffs, and it's a big reason why New York actually reached the finals. But as Anthony noted, kind of helps when the other former MVP and champion of your team steps up and delivers. 17.6 points per game, 7.6 boards, shoots 56.1% from the floor, 42.9 from three. Perfect, 19 and 19 from the line. Jonquel Jones saved the Liberty in Game 5 and deservedly took home the Finals MVP award. Anthony, you talked about, my history with the Liberty. As someone who spent a lot of time at MSG in the early years of the WNBA, my cousins have had season tickets since year one in 1997. I watched as they made the finals in 4 of the first 6 seasons of the league, only to lose each time. The first 3 to the Cynthia Cooper, Cheryl Swoops, Tina Thompson-led Houston Comets. The 4th to the Lisa Leslie, Mowati, Mabika, Delisha Milton-Jones-led Los Angeles Sparks. And starting in 2004, they lost 4 times in the East semis, 4 times in the East finals, last time in 2015. And there were some rough years after that. As Anthony kind of touched on, low-lighted by the 2-20 COVID season of 2020. But what Sandy Brondello has done since taking the reins, along with the additions of Jones and Stewie to the front court and Sabrina coming back from injury to lead the backcourt, has returned this team, one of the WNBA's OG franchises, to glory days not seen since Teresa Weatherspoon, who had floor seats at the Barclays for Game 5, was running the point for Richie Adebayo. The look on Teaspoon's face when the clock hit all zeros and Liberty were finally champions was just priceless. It's been a long time coming. Glad we finally got here. Congrats, ladies. Well done.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a sentimental moment, and then I'm going to call out somebody really quick to finish this up.
I know where you're going with this call out, by the way.
Okay, you know where I'm going with the call out. The sentimental moment is very simple. Back to Teresa Weatherspoon for a second. In the years where the Liberty were in the finals pretty much every single year, 1997, 1999, and 2000, the most famous shot in WNBA history happened a quarter of a century ago. Unfortunately, in a loss of a series when Teresa Weatherspoon literally hit a over midcourt buzzer beater to tie the Houston Rockets in their best of 3 series. The Houston Comets.
Freudian slip. I know, it's fun.
Big Freudian slip. It's kind of like the Washington Redskins. And you go and basically made a shot that sent the Liberty to a winner-take-all Game 3, which they lost. One of their 5 finals losses until then. Lost their first championships pretty much to the defunct Houston Comets now. But it's nice to see this team come full circle 25 years after what is still known as the most famous shot in WNBA history. Of course, again, in an L in the series. But watching Teresa just cry right afterwards, it's kind of a sentimental moment out there. And
I witnessed it firsthand, Rabbi. I was in the stands that day.
It was a very exciting moment. Again, unfortunately, didn't end up with the result it was. So it is a sentimental moment. I do have to say that watching that and finally seeing this franchise get their apex mountain is really, really awesome to see.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to talk about the game for a second, which, by the way, the most watched playoff game in 25 years in the WNBA since they put their finals on big NBC back in the day with Mike Breed on the call. Very simple as this. It was a very nip and tuck game. There were fouls called in the final minute against Minnesota. Were they ticky-tack? Maybe. But there are fouls that I would almost call in most situations when there is contact near the end of the game. And LeBron James, I don't need you tweeting that let the players play in the final minutes. Let the refs actually do their job. They're not there to basically be spectators and say hi to Breonna Stewart as she gets hacked at the line. And by the way, you rarely get a second chance at life. Breonna Stewart got a second chance at life, getting a chance to make 2 free throws again after missing 2 free throws the previous time. It was a call that was marginal. It's perfectly understandable if people are pissed, but Cheryl Reeves saying that their team got hosed out of a championship, show some respect to your opponent, Cheryl. You are an Olympic coach. You are a person that is one of the most revered coaches in the league, if not the most revered. Shut up and just admit your team ended up losing, because guess what? That foul doesn't mean anything to do with the 5 turnovers that you had in overtime later that game when you could not hold on to the ball at all. It's not like that game cost you the game. You had a chance to win it in overtime.
Multiple.
So you know what? Shut up next time and just admit that you just came up short. It is terrible to lose like that in a game 5 and a winner-take-all game for a championship, especially in overtime. But guess what? You need to swallow your pride a little bit and not go after the refs after the game saying they did a horrible job. They got a lot more calls in game 5 because Sandy Brondello complained about them after the end of game 4. You got a lot of more calls in game 4 because you complained out of the refs after a loss in game number 3. It's a fact of life. Deal with it. I think the better team won in this situation, and congrats to one of the OGs of the WNBA, the New York Liberty.
Yeah, I would say this too. Getting back to the show to Reeves, if you got anything out of the big difference in game 5 was the supporting cast for the Liberty showed up and the supporting cast for the Lynx did not. Outside of defensive Collier, who was phenomenal in this series, and Kayla McBride, they got nothing out of anyone else. And Williams was
Gabby Williams did some good stuff at the beginning of the series too, especially that game 1.
Yeah, but you kind of tell that the additional minutes that she was playing really caught up to her in the end. And then you mentioned the 5 turnovers, the 1 field goal they had in overtime, the fact that they had a 12-point lead and pretty much controlled the first 2.5 quarters of this game when you had Unesco and Stewart combining for 5 for 34. I mean, this is a game that it didn't come down to one call. I mean, a lot happened in this game. And the fact that it was going to Jacqueline Jones and Ryan Sowerby, who Kayla Thornton come off the bench and chipping in. That really spearheaded that Liberty comeback in the second quarter, and going into the third quarter of that game. So there was a lot of things that happened. It wasn't just the one call. I just thought it was really just really low hanging fruit.
Dog eat dog game.
Yeah, it was low hanging fruit considering Minnesota had a phenomenal year. They just came out of a dogfight series against the Connecticut Sun. It had one of the great comebacks in game 1 of this series. Could have easily won game 3 if the Nescu doesn't hit that shot from half court almost. So like I said, it was just a low-hanging fruit, and it was a phenomenal series and a very hard-fought series that, you know what, coincidentally, maybe it was fate that it had to come to an overtime, that it had to come down to that. And the Liberty showed that they were the better team, and not because of just the stars, it's because other players stepped up. And I didn't even mention Phoebus, the rookie, who kind of got bounced around a little bit and finally got her opportunity to shine and was instilled as a starter, just literally start applying to the playoffs and only answered with 21 points in her first start in the postseason. And I had a front row seat to that game as well. So the Liberty just showed that they were the better team, and they just had enough to get across the finish line. And at the end of the day, it was a great series, but women's basketball was the biggest winner in all of this by far.
Amen.
Absolutely. That does it. It's 12:07 a.m. Time to finish this up. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. I'm a man, and I'm almost 40. YouTube.com/on the sports lines on demand.
By the way, happy
Facebook.
birthday to both you guys, by the way.
Thank you. Good. Thank you so much. YouTube.com/on the sports lines on demand. Facebook.com/on the sports lines live. And Jay, let's do it.
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to each new show, like tonight's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, there is a link to a great piece by The Athletic's Jason Stark on why this World Series between Aaron Judge's Yankees and Shohei Ohtani's Dodgers could be MLB's version of the Larry Bird Magic Johnson NBA Finals of 1984. The rabbi touched on some of the historical reasons, but there are so many more. It's a fun read and worth your while to check out.
I don't like stats, but just seeing some of the stats of this matchup is kind of insane. So always definitely worth your time. We'll see you next time on the Sports Lines. Enjoy the World Series. Go Yanks.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Nope.